Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was about to potentially be empowered to revoke the passports of American citizens who were too critical of Israel. And that's according to legislation that Republican Congressman Brian Mast was drafting and planning to propose. Now, journalist Ryan Grimm has reported that there's been an update to this story. Apparently, he has backed off of that provision, probably because it's, I don't know, unconstitutional, illegal to force American citizens to say complimentary things about a foreign government that's currently carrying out a genocide. But the fact that this was even a consideration by Congressman Mast, a man, by the way, who showed up to the halls of Congress wearing an IDF uniform, just kind of gives you a sense of how much control this foreign government has over our own lawmakers. And it might have to do something with just how much money they take from the Israel lobby, which is quite a bit. When it comes to Brian Mast, it's to the tune of $700,480 as of March of this year. And Marco Rubio certainly has been enabling anything and everything Israel wants to do, regardless of international law, regardless of the atrocities and war crimes that Israel has carried out. And would you look at that? He has taken even more money from the Israel lobby, more than $1 million as of January of last year. So who knows, the number might be higher. So Cenk, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so here we go. Exactly as predicted, tragedy is used as an opportunity to try to silence people, and particularly their first priority, as always, is silence the critics of Israel. So first of all, Representative Mast is not a US representative. He served in the IDF. He showed up in the halls of Congress wearing the uniform of a different country. That's unacceptable. And he, of course, now this doesn't unfortunately separate him from 90% of Congress, but he thinks we owe Israel pretty much everything. We've given them 310 billion already. We should give them more, endless amount of money. Of course, their genocide and ethnic cleansing is great, etc. American taxpayers to give to the country that Representative Mast actually loves, which is Israel. So you are, by the way, again, you're allowed to criticize the US government, but if we think that you might begin to aid and abet or give material comfort, okay, well, so what's material comfort? By the way, if you aid and abet terrorists, that's actually a crime, and you should be charged with that, because I don't want anybody aiding and abetting terrorists. And then you're gonna have a lot of issues. If we have evidence on you, we're gonna put you away for a long time. But the reason to do it through Marco Rubio, as the original suggestion was, is that so you don't have to have evidence, it doesn't have to be a violation of the law, and one person can unilaterally make that decision. And by the way, Israel has critics on the left and the right and the middle. So everybody's on the chopping block. Oh, Charlie Kirk was killed? They're thinking, oh, that's now an excuse, an ability to take away your rights. And again, Charlie Kirk's legacy, a lot of people on the right would say, was about freedom of speech. Whether you agree or disagree with that, certainly that's what Charlie said all the time. And in his way of seeing the world, he was a huge advocate for freedom of speech. And if you use his death to take away freedom of speech here in America, well, you might break the irony record.
And the other thing I want to just note, sure, Brian Mast took that provision out of the legislation he's proposing, the one that would allow the Secretary of State to unilaterally, without due process, strip Americans of their passports if they're critical of Israel. However, I want to kind of get to the root of something that I see as a huge problem in this country, namely the ability of government officials to slap the label of terrorist onto pretty much anyone, right? So basically, Marco Rubio, if that type of legislation were to pass, would be able to revoke passports simply by determining that the individual who's being targeted is a terrorist. But how do you even determine what terrorist is? Like, what is the definition? What are the guidelines that government officials would be using to designate someone as a terrorist? Well, it's pretty vague. Anyone or everyone gets, honestly, these days, labeled terrorist in America if they say something that might be inflammatory. Now, Seth Stern, who's the director of advocacy at Freedom of the Press Foundation, told The Intercept that Marco Rubio has claimed the power to designate people terrorist supporters based solely on what they think and say, even if what they say doesn't include a word about a terrorist organization or terrorism. And look, when it comes to material support for terrorism, meaning aiding and abetting a terrorist group or a terrorist, that could literally just mean speech. So the Supreme Court ruled in 2010 that even offering advice about international law to designated terror groups could be classified as material support. The government even deemed a woman who was kidnapped and forced to cook and clean for Salvadorian guerrillas a material supporter of terrorism in order to justify her deportation. So even the designation of a terrorist sympathizer or someone who aids and abets a terrorist group is super vague and can be applied pretty generously to anyone, including someone who's been kidnapped, forcibly kidnapped by a guerrilla group, and is now deemed a supporter of terrorism because of the fact that she was forced to cook and clean for that group. It's crazy, absolutely insane.
In the middle of this super serious story, just the idea of her serving gorillas as in apes rather than militants. Okay, if you're aiding and abetting gorillas or orangutans, Marco Rubio and Brian Mast are gonna have real problems with you. Okay, guys, under this interpretation, you could arrest or take away the passport of, and hence in the citizenship of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Theo Vaughn, Tim Dillon, Joe Rogan, of course us, me and Anna, Piers Morgan, although he's not a US citizen, so that one's gonna be easy. And by the way, in his last couple of days, even though Charlie Kirk was an enormous supporter of Israel and what they were doing in Gaza, he did question Israel within the last couple of weeks. And he even talked about the power of Jewish donors as it relates to Israel, etc. So it would potentially even apply to Charlie Kirk. I mean, just when you thought they couldn't get any more ironic. No, we have a First Amendment. And I know Israel hates that we have a First Amendment. And a lot of our corrupt congressmen that don't serve this country, corrupt government officials like our Secretary of State, etc. They think there should be an asterisk on the First Amendment, unless you criticize Israel, in which case we're gonna unleash the full might of the American government against you. It's indefensible, except the only people defending it are the people in power.
That's right. Well, look, Mast backed off of it. So at least the passport provision, which was infuriating to say the least. But we should keep a lookout for that kind of stuff, Jake, because I would not be surprised if it gets brought back up when no one's paying attention.
Yeah, and look, the passport part gets taken out. Although the fact that he suggested it and they were gonna do it until they got pushback is super interesting. And that's why it's important to have allies in the right, because they don't care about pushback from the left. They do care about pushback from the right and sometimes the middle. Okay, so, but the rest of it is still in there. They're still gonna try to find a way for you to be punished severely if you disagree with Israel under the pretense of somehow aiding terrorism. If you're aiding terrorism, we're gonna actually lock you up. But we need evidence and due process for that, because this is still America, barely, but it is still America, as much as Israel and the corrupt US politicians who serve Israel might hate that. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.